of our course. And today we're going to talk about Hong Kong changing from a manufacturing powerhouse to a financial center. And that change happened over in this from the 70s to the 80s. And it also would include a discussion regarding Hong Kong gaining confidence, especially when compared to mainland China, which was you can say, a big development. And I remember when I was first doing Hong Kong studies, and a lot of the impression was that Hong Kong's identity, part of the Hong Kong identity was that confidence of um, being more educated, being more affluent compared to, for example, people in the mainland China. And that was the early view. And so that was part of the Hong Kong identities in the past. Now, we have already seen that that wasn't always the case, especially in the 50s and 60s, when a lot of Hong Kong people were still struggling with their identity, and many still felt that they were just coming to Hong Kong as sojourners or at least migrants to Hong Kong. They still care about Chinese politics. But since the riots in 67, a lot of people start focusing more on their lives in Hong Kong rather than what they left behind or what's happening up in North. And especially with the second generation, the Cantonese speaking second generation growing up. So today we talk about a few things. So that is very important in the development of the Hong Kong's people identity. And some of it is still kind of impacting how we see the Hong Kong people see the world. So, but we start with the changing from the Hong Kong being a manufacturing, how that developed. Now we talked about um, the working class mentality of Hong Kong people. We can talk more about Hong Kong's manufacturing status in the 1950s and 60s and all the way to 70s when it started changing. Now, let's back up a little bit. Hong Kong's transition to becoming a manufacturing powerhouse in the 50s and 60s is really a result of the influx of expertise that we've already mentioned, the entrepreneurs in Shanghai, the investment, combined with the cheap labor force that, thanks to the influx of migrants, that create a manufacturer or employers market in Hong Kong. And the UN embargo on China following the Korean War or following the start of the Korean War also helped because a lot of people at that time did try to help, and we do have earlier days, so-called you can say red merchants in Hong Kong. For example, for Ying Dong, it will be a famous one, and he would smuggle materials into China because of the embargo. So that really cemented Hong Kong's position as a entrepreneur. But it also, with the influx of resources, investment, entrepreneurs, Hong Kong also starting to develop into a manufacturing. If you look at the figures from 1955 to 1965, the value of manufactured exports of Hong Kong rose by about slightly less than three times. But it was a huge increase within a decade. Now, the Hong Kong government realized that, and in the 70s, it continued to try helping that development. And they followed two major strategies. One is to invest in major infrastructure. Now, this is part of also what Manly Host did, that he saw Hong Kong's potential and invest. Last time we saw the investment in transportation and housing, but also the infrastructure for export. For example, the Kwai Chung containers port, which would be completed in the 1970s, and at one time it was among the world's top 5 busiest ports. until 2018 when it was surpassed by Guangzhou and Busan, and probably other ports now. But for a long time, I remember when I was a young school student, it's a place that, or it's something that the Hong Kong people were quite proud of, that being such a busy port, given the size of Hong Kong. But because of that strategic position of Hong Kong, not only being a manufacturer itself, but also being that important entry port for China, and so makes Hong Kong a very busy port. And another thing, probably more consequential would be the laissez-faire affairs, which make Hong Kong a really free port. So Hong Kong is free in many senses, as we'll see later in today's class. So basically, promoting very low tax and oftentimes not charging um, uh, any tariffs. So it's very free, so that Hong Kong would become a very convenient place for people to do business, and that laissez-faire and of course also extend to the government's position, keeping their hands off trade, and that would result in a lot of investments in Hong Kong in the in those years. Companies like that, they would not have a lot of red tape. They would have a lot of uh, freedom in doing businesses, and that really helped Hong Kong's economy. It has a downside on the housing, as we'll see next class. So because of that, the Hong Kong government all for a long time try not to interfere with financial activities in Hong Kong. So that was a lot of the big consequence in Hong Kong in the future. But for the 70s, especially the 60s and 70s and 80s, and actually beyond, it was very important, and that really gained a really good reputation for Hong Kong when people coming in do not expect to be a lot of control, do not expect to face a lot of taxes, a lot of regulations, and they could do as long as they're not, breaking any like corruption laws. They're actually quite welcome to do business in Hong Kong, and that really helped. Now, but before we look more on the financial side, we also look at why Hong Kong was so successful especially in the 70s. Now that's important because that allowed Hong Kong to gain a lot of wealth, and that changed Hong Kong people's mindset. But the reason why was that because of the rise of the four Asian tigers in um, the times around 70s, it was, if you want to pinpoint. Now that has to do with a model that Japan developed. Now, traditionally, in the past, third world countries, they gain wealth by increasing agriculture products or some kind of mines, materials, exports, and exporting the national resources. So that's the model, and that's how also the colonial powers took advantage of them. Now, Japan after the war also faced a really tough situation, especially with the Japan lacking natural resources, but they did have a uh, very low wage labor population because after the war, a lot of the Japanese men lost their jobs and means to find work, and a lot of people also need to work. So they did have that. So, and when the Korean War broke out, Americans were very eager to help Japan stand on its feet. So it allowed a lot of technology to go into Japan. So when Japan say, okay, we want to develop this, we want to start this factories, Americans would be willing to allow that to happen. And so in the process, they learn the technology, and they also learn how to make things, competitive because of Japanese very famous dedication to details, and also they also their pride in their craftsmanship. So that is very key. If you knowing main difference between Japanese restaurants and say Chinese restaurants, that Japanese restaurants, especially in Japan, they often specialize in one item. So unlike Chinese restaurants, or say if you go to a Hong Kong style cafe in here in Vancouver, you find that it has like a 100 something items, okay? And you wonder how could they cook all kinds of food, Chinese, sometimes Japanese, Korean, and Southeast Asian, all kinds of food they can cook. Uh, Chinese Western cook, or Hong Kong style Western food, they cook everything. And how can you do that in such a tiny kitchen? Japanese restaurants often more focus on perfecting their skills, okay? So they have this one very famous items. Okay, they broth with their ramen, and they maybe have some choices, but they people would go there because of um, that dish, okay, or that taste. Um, and oftentimes they feel really they're very proud of spending years perfecting their skills. So Japanese have that sense of pride. Chinese, now this is of course stereotyping and generalizing. I'm not talking about everybody, okay? But in Chinese, oftentimes the success is rated by profits. Whether your restaurants make money, whether it's expanding the size of it, it's not really about, so it's about catering to the needs of the customer so that you be successful. And Japanese is catering to the needs, but also in a way to be proud of your skill set, and also hoping that people will appreciate, the efforts you put in that piece of artwork or that piece of product. Now, when Japanese use that dedication to details and pride in production, they create wonderful products, and combined with the relatively cheap labor force, they find a new way to be successful in the world, which is to produce high-end goods that comes with a lower price tag. And that way, they would compete to the world. So it's not just exporting, materials, or producing low-end goods for some like uh, developed world markets, but it's also underdeveloped world markets. But it's producing high-end goods, but with a cheaper price tag for the developed world. So it's like competing against the rest, um, using high-end products, but more affordable. So um, I do remember that personally, because I remember my father, when he came to Canada, he would insist on buying U.S. cars, even though a lot of Japanese cars are very durable. My mom and I, really want him to buy a Toyota instead of a U.S. car, but he insists. His reasoning was that back in Hong Kong many years ago, Japanese cars were much cheaper. So it would be a sign of, wealth if you purchase a U.S. car, at least show that you could afford the U.S. car. So his argument is that now I'm in Canada, why am I spending the same amount of money to buy a Japanese car when I can buy a U.S. car? It usually often turns out to be quite a bad decision, because the U.S. vehicles that we used to possess often will and have problems within like 5 or 6 years. So when I start purchasing my vehicles, I will always buy Toyota. And because I'm very bad mechanics, I'm very bad handyman. So I'm not good with repair. So I really want my cars to be durable. So something like Toyota or Honda will be wonderful, because they as long as you keep them maintained, you can drive them for at least 10 years and more. So almost all of my Toyota vehicles would last for a long time. So that's how I liked it. But anyway, so this funny clip about Japanese products, this impression about in the past, well, now what is good thing about Japan, but then by 80s, everyone knows because Japanese products outsold everyone. So this is an interesting clip of Back to the Future.
No wonder this circuit failed. It says made in Japan.
What do you mean, Doc? All the best stuff is made in Japan.
Unbelievable.
Of course, the joke was that Marty came back to 1950s, right? And Doc was still in the 1950s mindset, okay? What good things can come out of Japan? But by the time of the 80s, where Marty came from, Japanese products dominate the world. And Japanese investors also dominate the world, especially the US. They start purchasing all these buildings and real estates in the States and in the 80s. So it was a change. Now, the four Asian tigers, in Chinese actually is called the four little dragons. The four Asian tigers, they learned from the Japanese model. They had a similar situation uh, like Japan. They lack resources. They're very small. For example, we're talking about Hong Kong and Singapore. Bigger, South Korea and Taiwan would be bigger, more resources. But Hong Kong and Singapore, tiny cities. Okay, so how could they compete with the world? So they learned from Japan. Is that okay? We're going to pick up high and we're going to produce high quality products, but because of the population we have, and also because they have some advantage of a, especially in those days, a relatively uh, more, I won't say dictatorship, but less democratic. So there's less labor issues, okay? Unlike some other European countries and times like the UK, they've got lots of labor issues. So wherever you want to put something, you want to make workers to work longer, to produce cheaper goods is very difficult because they would fight back. But places like including Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, they all have that kind of advantages. The government is stronger in terms of controlling and issuing, not allowing a lot of the labor movements to develop. So as a result, they can really push projects through. And in the 70s, that was what they needed. The government said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to have this products. We're going to pick up this manufacturing model, and then they start producing. And the method worked in terms of GDP, you can say, okay. By 1976, 60% of all developing countries' manufacturing exports came from these countries, okay, with only 3% of its population. So basically, a lot of the products in the world was being made by these countries. And for example, in Korea, South Korea, the General Fortune, he pushed a state direct export that continued to be used. The model is kind of like the Zaibatsu in Japan. So you have powerful family conglomerates start business like Hyundai, Samsung, and LG, and they receive state initiatives, for example, tax breaks and other administrative convenience, and that created a very competitive companies. So the idea is that why should we limit our own companies while they can compete with the world? Like if we allow them, give them benefits, they could compete with the world, and that will in turn, benefits Korea's economy. And so that's the idea. Of course, that was true, and you can see South Korea is still doing really well financially. But of course, it also creates a different level of corruption because of the powerful families. There was one time there's this incident. I'm not sure if you heard the Korean airline, the daughter of the family that owned the airline, she was on a plane and she was looking, she was flying there, but then she found out her favorite nuts were not there, so they didn't have that in stock, and so she was furious, and so she demanded the plane to be delayed, and then and before they can stock up the nuts, the snacks she prefer. And partly, you can say she believed that this is such a nice snack that you must be equipped, but having the flight to delay for that is ridiculous, right? And then the news came out, she had to resign and apologize. But that's all kinds of, very powerful families that can make crazy decisions. In Taiwan, the son of Chiang Kai-shek, Chiang Jing-kuo, they call him Ah Guo, as because he was a lot more friendlier than his father, you can say, and he launched a um, 10 big projects in the 1970s after the Taiwan lost their UN seat to mainland China. So during a time of hardship, and they felt surrounded by enemies in the world, and even the US is deserting them, they put a lot of money in invest a lot of money in public works. Okay, so in a way to help Taiwan to not only develop the infrastructure they need, because part of those projects will be infrastructure projects, but also help Taiwan to grow financially, because to get people in the working force. And Singapore, another story. Lee Kuan Yew was very smart. After it got kicked out from Malaysia, it create this, you can say soft, I would call it soft authoritarian city state. Yes, people today kind of sometimes we say, oh, Singapore is not free because they have, they're not totally democratic. But given the challenges Singapore face, I would really personally call Lee Kuan Yew a really good leader. They create things that people thought impossible. For example, Singapore Airline, when people thought, who would fly this small airline? Why not? Because Malaysia has an airline, okay? But he created ways to compete, and he created this image of Singapore girl, created you can say uniform that represents some Southeast Asian, but not exactly belong to a certain country. So Singapore find its way and always had this reputation of being very pragmatic and very professional, and the people are there very to the point, and very capable. For a long time, that kind of a workforce is only matched or surpassed by one place, or by one one other uh, competitor, you can say, that would be Hong Kong. So the Singapore model, is really great, but there's one model that's stronger than in terms of doing business and being financially strong, and a big manufacturing house. That would be Hong Kong. So because Hong Kong people is just as capable, just as pragmatic, the Hong Kong working force is just as dedicated, and Hong Kong investment environments are even better, in certain ways. The only thing lacking comparing to Singapore, because Singapore has a stronger government control, they also had a kind of, at that point in the early days, it was not appeared to be so, but they also had a stronger sense of control regarding the livelihood of people. So they have a stronger say on housing, and that will eventually come back to bite Hong Kong. But anything else, whether it's a freedom in investment, in doing business, or in regulations, red tape, and in the quality, education of the people, of the human resources, the number of international financing, or international companies opening up headquarters, the number of those, Hong Kong surpassed Singapore for a long time. So Singapore is already very highly competitive, but Hong Kong was even more so. And in the 70s, it's also a big manufacturing house. many of the products I remember using when I was young, plastic products, this red A, case that we used to take to school, bread, a hot water bottle. My grandmother has a few, very durable underwear, Chinese medicines are still being, um, you know, uh, being used, or you can, what's the best words for it? It's still being highly regarded, put it this way, by Chinese parents. Okay, that cough syrup, 青木枇杷膏, and all this 保仔丸, the pills. Chinese medicines are wonderful products. Okay, they say they do everything. Okay, they say they do everything. It's very different from Western medicine. Western medicine is about being specific, whether you can pinpoint what's the cause and pinpoint the drugs, the active ingredients in the drugs that help, so we can produce that pills. And you take it, you're going to heal you. So Western medicine, the key is being specific, but uh, when you have a very potent drug in your body, it's very seldom that that is very specific, okay, to aim at one area. So the side effects is usually the Achilles heels for Western medicine. And the best example, of course, would be the cancer, the cancer drugs, right? Well, whether it's a chemotherapy or so, it basically destroy your body. And yes, it kills fast growing cells, multiplying cells, but also other parts of other fast multiplying cells in your body. For example, hair, your digestive system, things like that. Chinese medicine is not specific. They have some kind of ancient writings about experience about doing this is going to help, but they never bother into going into the active ingredients. Okay, they just take this, and so they make it. And so if you look at the labels, they say this syrup, this pills do everything. Does it help? Maybe. But Chinese medicine is always about improving your health, yeah, your overall well-being, and fighting against the diseases, not specifically against a certain disease usually. So we can say that in the long run, taking Chinese medicine may not be a bad idea, because it helps your body to improve, immunity, your condition in your body. In the short run, if you go to a ER and you want to take care of one immediate problems, you would want Western medicine. You want to go into a surgery, or taking a really fast working drugs to take care of the issue right away. So that you need Western medicine. But long term, taking Western medicine is not a good thing for you. And because Western medicine really would hurt your organs, including especially kidneys and liver, because it really overwork them to get rid of all these medicines from your body. So if you're just having and not feeling so well, but you keep taking drugs, there's high chance of you, needing dialysis in the future. So I know all this. That's why I share a bit more about this, because I start as with my major was pharmacology. So I actually finished master before I switched to translation and humanities. Okay, so I do remember one of my professors in one of the earliest course remind us, okay, be careful about Western medication. And he said you don't shoot rabbit with a machine gun. So if you have something, slight ailment, you don't want to take something really strong that affects the whole body. So it's just my advice. Sorry. Okay. But it's not without some worries in the future for Hong Kong manufacturing industry, because in the 70s, while it's increasing really well, it's also facing danger, especially closer to the 80s, because of a lot of international development, especially the worldwide protectionism that came especially as a result of Japan's domination. For example, in the States, the car industry, that they when Japanese cars is compete against the U.S. cars industry, vehicle industry, especially in Detroit, the workers get really frustrated and they seeing that people are buying a lot of Japanese, so a lot of protectionism is coming up, and also the world's economy is not so great for the manufacturer because of the reliance on crude oil, and because of the political situation in Middle East, OPEC in 1973, in retaliation to Western support of Israel, triple world oil prices. That really had a great impact. And Hong Kong, also affected because it was one of the manufacturer, its real GDP slowed down from 12.3% in 1973 to only 2.3% in 1974, and further down 0.4 in 1975. So eventually it rebounds, but it was a difficult time for the world economy. And I remember that I didn't live through this, it's too old, but I remember seeing this commercial that is about the lineup in gas because it was shortage of gas, and a lot of the places, they didn't have enough, so long lineups for people trying to stock up for gas when gas was available. And you have this ad of McDonald's, which is interesting to see nowadays.
Excuse me.
Yeah?
Would you watch my place in line? I'm just gonna run over to McDonald's.
Yeah.
Hey! Would you get me a Big Mac?
Oh, sir, would you bring us 3 fries, please? And a Coca-Cola.
Say, how about a quarter pounder?
And a strawberry shake.
You deserve a break today.
You.
Nobody makes your day like McDonald's can.
I doubt the gas line was ever that cheerful, or cherry, but that's the ad, okay? So it's because of the long lineups at the gas stations. As mentioned, protectionism, people actually smashing some Honda cars, to voice the frustration. So protectionism means export is facing challenges. And it was around that time also that the China situation changed. So that also helped why Hong Kong switched from a manufacturer to a financial center. But before we go to that, let's watch a clip. I often like playing because it shows a Hong Kong city in transition. This is I think, early 1980s clip, or I think it's a documentary about the life of a boat people. The boat people, the Tanka, would be people who live on boats for their lives, so they wouldn't actually go on land. The Hong Kong government tried to move them because now, thanks to the housing projects, they want to move the Tanka people on land, and of course, there's various reasons. Moving them to land, that means that their education will be assured. The kids will not be just fishing, for the future. It's also a better way to monitor their movement, and of course, it's also to tax people, because you can't tax tanker people if they move around, but you also end up with a lot of, poor living conditions on the boats, and the kids, they stay on the boats and not getting educated. So a lot of reasons why the government wants to move them. And in Hong Kong, those people would be active in area like, especially Lantau Island, a place called I.O. So the Hong Kong government wanted to change that. But he also shows some changes, as you will see in this video, which I always like to play to my students, to show the transitioning of Hong Kong society in the late 1970s and early 80s.
My name is Yin Kit. My family are boat people of Aberdeen and Hong Kong. Soon though, the government plans to move us all to resettlement blocks on land. I hurried home from school today so I could go out with my grandmother. My grandmother has been growing sampans all her life. She lets me help her though when we're in the main channel. We are going to clear fish traps. By the restaurant is a good place to set traps. Lots of little fish come to eat the food scraps the cooks throw out. Grandma empties the fish into a water tank to keep them alive. The people who buy them will store them underwater too. It's nearly dinner time. We're glad when we sell the last fish. Lam Ying Fei can't use his chopsticks very well yet. I'm the oldest, he's only 4. My father's a sailor. He sailed all around the world. Now he works on a harbour ferry and doesn't have to leave home. I think grown-ups love to play mahjong. My parents and grandparents play nearly every night. We curl up on the floor to sleep though, so we won't be tired for school. Tomorrow is a sports day for our school. My friends and I practice for the events in the playground on the school roof. I'm in the beanbag throwing and the 100-meter race. My girlfriend Wong Wing Sam counts for us. Wing Sam lives on land in a tower block. My parents are trying to get a flat in this block for when we have to move out of our houseboat. Wong Wing Sam says you get used to the stairs and there are more children to play with. I hope we get a flat as nice as the one she lives in.
陣間邊個排呢度未？好啊。呢啲咧陣間又轉後邊嗰度。
So this is a nice little clip about this boy, his experience in life. A lot of the things that is interesting because at that time you still have quite a sizable number of tanker people around, and they'll be catching fish, selling to each other, you know, and that will be the situation in the early 80s. But now if you go to Hong Kong, of course, no longer you will see them there, just fishermen, you know, and others, you know. And they'll be, when they were catching fish, just playing this Cantonese songs and music, and when they were at home, they play, basically that's their life. Okay? They cook and they sleep and they, you know, do everything on the ship. So that's the tankers people's life. And at the table, they were talking about, there were conversation there. You can tell that the the mother still spoke not a Hong Kong accent Cantonese, and the grandmother actually spoke something maybe close to a Tanka/Cantonese. Okay, it's kind of still understandable because she has to sell her fish, but definitely not a Hong Kong accent Cantonese. And the space was small, and so they have to sleep while they're playing MJ, on the ship, on the boat. And when they sing the song, this is a very Cantonese society because they were singing a traditional Chinese song, usually sung in Mandarin, but they sang the version in totally Cantonese. Doesn't match really well with the song and with the basically with the speech and harmony melody alignment is not very well because in Canton, when you sing, when you write lyrics, the melody should harmonize with the speech, meaning that it should sound like a speech because Canton has 9 sounds. Okay, we're not focusing a lot on this because it's not a course on Cantonese words, but that matching is important for Cantonese songs. But you can tell that it's not very well matched. So basically, it's just using Cantonese to sing a Mandarin song, and they also very small space. I remember this really well in my school. That's how we play. I think I mentioned about that as well. My school has hardly any playground, and throwing beanbag is a sport. Okay, so because it's so small, and throwing beanbags on the rooftop playground, this is not going to be dangerous. I remember we would play some kind of football or something. It would fly off the fence and land on the ground. So that's why that's kind of sports they would do. And this place I know really well because this is a Aberdeen, Hong Kong, and I remember that this building is still there, and the backdrop is still very similar with boats around, but mostly fishing boats, not the residential boats. Okay, because I live in South Horizon, my parents' place was in South Horizon for a long time. So when I visit them, I would stay there. So this is an area I know well. So when I watch this video, it's quite brings me a lot of memories. And he's talking about benefits of moving to the land. Lots of people, students to play with. He likes the apartment. And when the two of them spoke, they spoke a very Hong Kong accent Cantonese. So you can see this already changed. So as mentioned before, the government or the television stations don't need to do a lot. They don't need to train that's how you should speak. But when you just have a second generation growing up, you have a certain accent that's picked up and people learn from one another, and then you have cemented with a broadcaster from local, and that's how they hear, in the radio, in the television. And so that kind of a Hong Kong accent developed, and that remains today. Now, this is Hong Kong, so you can see things changing, housing developing, the social fabrics is forming, the language is forming, and the business is picking up. The father did not have to go work as a sailor anymore. He can work as a ferries, he can stay home. So the Hong Kong society is building up. Now, on the opposite side, in North, things are going really badly, especially during the Cultural Revolution that we mentioned. That was a result, that was the reason for the Hong Kong rise in '67. But the Cultural Revolution was also a big destruction of the Chinese society because of this revolutionary rhetoric. Okay, if you're good, if you're connection with the West, you're condemned, you're purged, you are the one of the 5 black, categories people, So a lot of the most talented, gifted people were purged and they were removed from the positions, and everyone was experienced removed. So meaning that China is really going downhill, not only in terms of political stability, but also financially, and also there's a brain drain, you can say, in China, because people were not studying, or they were not able to study and pursue a education like before. So if you look at the data, during the Cultural Revolution, it was a time when a lot of them were not getting a proper degree. Okay, a proper degree meaning it would be an undergraduate degree. Now this would be 4 years. In China, they still have some kind of a specialized degree which they call 专科. That can be 2 years, it can be 3 years, but not 本科, which is the undergraduate degree. So during Cultural Revolution is a time that a lot of them just only managed to study a certain specialized degree or semi-degree called here. But there's no way to tell what kind of degrees they were, maybe even 1 year. So overall, the whole situation is going really bad. So let alone the killings in the beginning, the dead bodies floating down the coast of Hong Kong that they could see, coming from China. But they knew the situation was bad, and they knew that people were not, it's hard to get education. The financial situation in China was bad. So suddenly you have a comparison. You have Hong Kong people on one hand now, they went through the chaos in the 50s and 60s. Now economy is picking up. Young people being educated, even the tanker boys and girls, they were being educated, so they literate, and the parents are finding jobs. The culture is strong because of as we see later, stronger than expected even. The Cantonese culture now, being dominant, and they have their shows about it. They have a heightened sense of confidence in Hong Kong people. Now, so these funny things happen, which is important for the Hong Kong ethos and also relevant to the later development of Hong Kong. And you can also say relevant to the continuous struggle between, you can say, Hong Kongers and mainlanders in a certain way, is that by the end of 1970s, there's a general feeling that the Hong Kong people are more superior. And in terms of financial stability, in terms of education, in terms of globalization, because Hong Kong people seem to know different languages, they know the world, they have foreigners operating, working in Hong Kong, starting business. Some of them work for foreign companies. They have higher education level. They have a much better command of English than the mainlanders. So it seems like they are a lot better. So I say the end of 1970s because we have proof for it. Because in 1979, there was a TVB television show called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And the storyline goes that it's the story of a family, but one of the sons, I can't remember why, he was left in China. So he couldn't join the family until he was already like in his early 20s. But they have an elder son who grew up in Hong Kong, so played by Chow Yun-fat, of course, tall, handsome, educated, this university degree in his hand. The daughter also a Hong Konger, but the son, he came to Hong Kong when he was already, I can't remember his age in the show, but maybe early 20s. So he experienced what's going on in China. He wasn't well educated. He spoke with an accent. He didn't speak with a Hong Kong accent. Well, not in the beginning anyway. The way, I remember when he crossed the border, he's trying to unite with his family. He's trying to pretend to be a Hong Konger. So when they were asking him questions, one of the scenes, I found that, I'm still trying to look for that. They asked him what's the proof that you are a Hong Kong person, and he started singing all these Hong Kong shows theme songs. Okay, I think I sing this, and then said, okay, you seem to be one, because at that time, yes, these Guangdong province, they're opening up, they started to be able to watch Hong Kong shows, but not the rest of China. So being able to sing it to the Hong Kong border police, seems like he knows Hong Kong enough to make that claim. But when he came, he found that he's way behind everything. in terms of knowledge, in terms of education, in terms of ability to find money, in terms of general cultural sense. Okay, he would do really stupid things, and his name is Atan. That's his name in the show, and we know that this is a sentiment shared by the Hong Kong people because the show was really popular. One of those, show that aired at 7 or 8, during those times in Hong Kong. So the show was very popular, and people start calling mainlanders Atan, using his name. And when they say Atan, it's not a flattering term; it's a derogatory term, meaning that you're just like Atan. You're just like him. That you're not educated. You speak with an accent. You're not globalized in your thinking. You are like a country bumpkin. You're backward. You're narrow-minded. You always look for profits. You look for little goodies. Doing ridiculous things. Okay, so that's the general thinking. And there's a term that I remember well because this is a term that they use not only in the show but also on the streets and even in television, in the news. Okay, they keep using 嗰啲係殘，those are 殘. So it is like a bad word. Okay, and because it's so common, that shows that kind of feeling was probably prevalent in Hong Kong. And people share that sentiment. I think that's why I call it the proof that Hong Kong people did have that sense of superiority over mainlanders in those days, because that show really showed that. And one of the things, of course, the kind of stupid things that Atan did was that he accepting a bet because he was working in a real low job, low pay job, and he one day, he's bragging about his power, he's good at certain things, and he said, okay, you finish 30 hamburgers within certain time in one go. Okay, if you do, we're going to give you this month's salary. Okay, then he accepted the bet, and people bet on that, and in the end, he got really sick. He managed to finish it, but that is a perfect example of trying to have some benefits, but really doing something silly, okay, and wrecking your health, okay. And so this is the scene, okay. Sorry, it's no English, but you can tell just from the action.
係輸緊啦，你輸緊啦！林林啊，喂阿燦啊，你得唔得㗎？唔得唔好夾硬嚟喎。關你咩事啫？你唔信可以賭埋你半個月人工㗎。係啊，你又試下。我食得晒你，將你啲糧俾晒我。你要全部吞晒，又要翻工添啊！冇錯啦。嚟啦！嚟啊！嚇！好，阿燦，放埋你。再晒嚇，咩未得晒嚇？快啲啊！快啲啊！吞埋佢，吞埋佢！你錢係我嚟㗎啦！吞埋佢，吞下先，我吞㗎啦！吞啊！吞啊！快啲！得未啊？得未啊？吞啦！吞埋佢就搞掂㗎啦！吞埋乜嘢啊？攞出嚟唔算贏晒啊！吞啊！肥大都吞啊！吞啊！快啲啊！快啲啊！衰仔賺啫，我走先啊！要睇幾日醫生啫。
So that's the scene. And in the background is actually playing some English music. So very typical of Hong Kong, a fast food chain. And that chain is still in existence, even though it's not doing as well as others. But that's the idea. So the sense that Hong Kong people have more superior is there. And they're all not only because of the advantage in culture, in finances, in education, in a global sense, but it's also a superiority in terms of the international influence. Because at that time, the Cantonese culture, that later we call Cantopop, even though some would limit Cantopop to music, I tend to call, it's like Cantonese pop culture, right? So I include also television and films and movies. Cantopop is also on the rise, which is a surprising one it was more like a kind of in the right place in the right time scenario. Because at that time when Hong Kong started producing more and more television shows in Cantonese, it was a time when there's two major stations, the TVB and Rediffusion, competing. So they would produce really high quality programs. Later on in the 80s, Rediffusion changed hands, and then they really became not competitive, especially into the 90s. So after TVB dominate, they no longer became as competitive as before. But for some time, they were very competitive. So they produced really high quality programs. And these programs were so thanks to the Cantonese diaspora in the world, because of all these different, Cantonese communities in the world, in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, North America, different places. This show's being sold everywhere. And in comparison, the other so-called Chinese communities, in mainland and Taiwan, they're not doing as well, because during Cultural Revolution in mainland, they only produce that kind of what they call model movies under the direction of Jiang Qin, Mao's wife. And they were doing this kind of ballet combined with revolutionary themes. They're not even the red guards want to see it. They only watch it because they didn't want to be criticized. Not even the mainlanders want to watch this kind of shows. And in Taiwan, they also have martial art scenes, for some time, so they have limitation of what kind of shows they could watch. And because they're afraid that, if they import some kind of shows from China or even Hong Kong, they may have some themes about communism that kind of shaken the KMT rule over Taiwan. So they have a martial law, they have a restriction, and Southeast Asia, because of the rise of Maoism, because of spread of communism, a lot of the countries also limited import of Chinese movies or have more restriction. So the Hong Kong television and movies rose at the best time when these shows start making their ways into these places, when these places were not producing anything. So Hong Kong production in the late 1970s and early 1980s, for example, the wuxia dramas, and it became so famous, in places other than Hong Kong. For example, in Taiwan, this show was the first one to be shown in Taiwan. The first Hong Kong television show permitted to show in Taiwan, and it created a highest rating that still to be surpassed today. So this is crazy. And it was said that during that time when it's being shown, I think at 8 o'clock, and everything closed to just to watch the shows. And the saying said that even the policeman can stay, in the station to watch the show, because even the robbers and the thugs and the thieves, they will stay home to watch. They didn't want to do the business, during that hour. So that's that crazy. And they would sing that theme song, very famous theme song, and they would sing in Cantonese because it was in Cantonese back then. And I've seen some Taiwanese shows, sometimes they would sing it just to remember, that experience, but they obviously cannot sing Cantonese, but they would still sing it. Remember one year in Kaohsiung, I was there many years ago. I was there, and suddenly I heard this song. We were having a barbecue, outside barbecue, and suddenly I hear this Cantonese song. Oh, that theme song was being played, somewhere close. So I started watching. It was a funeral procession. They were doing some memorial there, and they were playing that song because that song has a line saying that it says, when I go along, you don't have to bid me farewell, And so the Taiwanese people like to use that song for funeral procession, for farewell ceremony, because it's kind of saying, I don't have to worry about the loved ones departing because he or she can go along and to a better place, and we don't have to be so sad and bidding farewell. So that is a song that still being used. The other one is Bun, it's a show played by Chun Fan and Jiwazi. The two, they are very enduring Hong Kong stars, and they still, active, and they still look pretty fabulous given they're not young. And this show is one of the first show being allowed to air in China and broadcast in Shanghai in 1985. And again, became very popular, and the theme song, 小外滩, is still being sung. Okay, I will show a clip of different people singing the song, in my Cantonese World class. But since it's a Hong Kong program, it's Hong Kong history course, I'm not going to show that. Okay, I just want to have something different. Okay, for the two courses, but that's the situation. So Hong Kong television suddenly became international. People want to watch it because it's the only show with high quality available in those days, in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, and they don't mind, because they would dub it into Mandarin in Taiwan and China, even though they would keep the theme song in the original language. Just like now you watch Netflix, okay? You may be watching a show, Japanese anime, in English, but the theme song is still in English, because when you translate in Japanese, because when you translate into English, it sounds so odd, right? So strange. Now, not only television, but also movies. Now, I'm not going to go into details, but just telling you, Bruce Lee movies came out. Now, Bruce Lee's movies we shouldn't really call it a Cantonese movies, because unlike the movies of like Michael and Sam Hui, it's not about Hong Kong, and it's not often in Cantonese, because many of the Bruce Lee movies, when it came out, it came in different languages. You may find a Cantonese version, but I think most of the Bruce Lee movies I watched, they were usually in English. So it's always have that international sense. But Bruce Lee was a movie star under Golden Harvest. Golden Harvest was a breakaway from Shaw Brothers. You remember, Shaw Brothers were still doing a lot of the ancient Chinese wuxia genre, or the ancient Chinese stories, Butterfly Lovers, even after the Cantonese movies became more and more popular. Okay, so they kept it there. So the Mandarin movies that they created, they didn't really change. And so when this Raymond Hui, one of the executives of Shaw Brothers, saw that this is like crazy, they're not changing. So he notices guy Bruce Lee in the States. Okay, he was in Green Hornet. He's quite a marketable and potential star. So he recruited him, and they start making movies. Okay, so Golden Harvest started his own company, and they start marketing Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee, and that this is a long story short. Okay, because Bruce Lee really was revolutionary. He's single-handedly started this Kung Fu genre and single-handedly changed the mindset of international audience about Chinese lead. Before him, Chinese lead is usually some kind of derogatory, figure, some kind of unflattering role. And it was never a strong, so Chinese masculinity was very obscure before Bruce Lee. But then from now on, since him, is always associated with some kind of martial arts and Kung Fu. But Bruce Lee started that trend. And he really started the trend that, even a Asian male can play a lead. He was the first one, honestly. And became an international star. So, but again, because it's more of a Cantonese world theme, so I'm not going to talk more, but I'm just saying that Bruce Lee opened the international gateway for more Hong Kong stars, and also helped Golden Harvest to explore, local talents. Okay, stop thinking about this traditional Mandarin wuxia theme. Let's have this. Maybe even some more Hong Kong style movies can make it big in the world, And of course, he was right. Michael and Sam Hui, maybe the comedy maybe more with the Cantonese communities all over the world, very popular, but usually among Chinese audience. Cantonese audience, or not exactly Cantonese audience, because their Chinese audience also like watching it. I mean, non-Cantonese speakers audience also like watching it. But Jackie Chan would make it big, became a true international star following Bruce Lee. With his action, with his at that time young Bruce Lee, the good look, okay, and the stunts, okay. I know Jackie Chan is no longer a favorable star in Hong Kong, especially among young Hong Kong people, because of his, some of the things that he said, and also because of his support of the communist regime in China. Okay, he's really outspoken, supporting China, but he's not only that. A lot of the actors or actresses have to somewhat, if you want to do business in China, right? But he's always outspoken, and to the point of getting people unhappy. For example, when he's found cheating, which he has a long history of doing. Now when he got caught finally, or at least because this lady came out and he said, "Oh, I committed a sin that every man would commit." Okay, so it basically got every man angry, and then he would come in on Taiwan's democratic system, when Taiwan system was still, there's some fighting in the legislative council, or the legislative wing. He would say that, "Oh, Taiwan's, this is bad, people need to be ruled, okay, they can't be given too much freedom, and so he'd be saying all kinds of things. So he's not very popular, but back in the 80s he was, and he was kind of like a Tom Cruise now. You think about doing a lot of stuff. Now he did have stunt doubles, okay, because a lot of the actions he did was really dangerous. But he got hurt. He did many of the things himself as well, and so he has shared his injuries because of that. And people love him for trying new things, okay, trying new moves, trying new ideas in his movies. So for one time, he was really popular, in a lot, and opened a lot of markets, including Japan and Korea, and South Korea. So there was a time when Hong Kong movies were produced in such a big number that is called the golden 10 years, from the late from 1983 to 1996. Well, a bit more than 10 years, as total as 1,525 Hong Kong movies were made. So it was a heyday of Cantopop, of course, with it, the synergy with the music. And so Hong Kong pop music was also very popular, Leslie Cheung and Andrew Mui. Now, I just want to mention this because it helps to add to that, you can say, confidence, and in many cases arrogance of Hong Kong people. Seems like they are on top of the world. Seems like, yes, we are Cantonese speaking, but Cantopop is all over the world. Everyone listens to it, likes it. We're doing well financially, especially when they compare to their northern neighbors. Okay, when compared to mainlanders. Okay, this is like, so later scholars oftentimes would call this sense of prosperity, international mindset, high level education, Cantonese culture as the Hong Kongers' identities, which I don't disagree. What I'm trying to say is that it's not the Hong Kong identities that came right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, if you remember, we talked about, a couple classes before, the Hong Kong identity is just an identity not aligned with the revolutionary ideals, okay? It's not like shouting slogans, it's not like the Red Guards, okay? So that is the Hong Kong identity is more like, no, we're not that. But the Hong Kong identities took at least a decade or so to build, because of the growth of the second generation, the forming of the Hong Kong accent, Cantonese, and also because of this comparison between Hong Kong and China. So by the 1980s, now when I say late 1970s, that kind of differences already formed, okay? But really by 1980s, that Hong Kong identity that we mentioned, a few identities really formed. So this is, you can say, the completion of the forging of the Hong Kong identity. Now, not to say that the Hong Kong identity would not continue to change. Of course, it continues to change. But in the 80s, the kind of modern Hong Kong identities that we kind of recognize and we know of has been formed. So they see themselves more international. They're multilingual, at least bilingual. They are very strongly Cantonese. And later on, they're also a financial power. So they have the people they're educated. They have got good working ability. They are a developed economy in Hong Kong. So that everything kind of cemented that Hong Kong identity by the 80s. Now, but things keep changing. Now we also have this change of even though Hong Kong has been doing well financially because of the manufacturing, but we also have to look at the transition to being a financial center. Now, when this financial center came by, it really has to do with China. Now, China. Finally, Mao died, in 1976. I have no sympathy for him, provide all kinds of, tragedies he brought to China, with his stubbornness, with his ultra-leftist, radical leftism and Maoism, but he died in 1976 and he was succeeded by a guy called Hua Guofeng. Hua Guofeng was a nobody, even in the communist, world. He was just selected because the revolutionaries, later to be termed the Gang of Four, and the old guards, Zhou Enlai and Zhou Enlai died already. So old guards, for example, the old foreign minister Chen Yi and the younger ones, for some Deng Xiaoping, the older guards, they were still fighting for power. Now, the old guards remembered Mao like playing one group against another. So that's how he maintained power and they maintained everyone loyal to him still. But when he died, the two sides was gearing up to fight for the ultimate power in China. And so they picked someone, Mao picked someone in the middle, basically a fence-sitter, so that both sides could agree on. Because if you pick anyone more closer to one side, neither of them would agree. Or the other side would not agree. So he picked Hua Guofeng, which was a nobody, in a way that if you look at how he later pictured himself, for example, this one, it looks like a picture, but it's not. It's actually a painting. But they tone it down to make it in black and white as it looks like it's a picture of Mao, trusting Hua. But in reality, by the time they picked Hua Guofeng, Mao was already really old. So Mao was just picked just so that the two sides could continue without fighting it out. The only thing Hua that really did was monumental or decisive was to arrest the Gang of Four because he was afraid that they would attack him. And he arrested them, he put them on trial, but from then on, he said that his policy would be two efforts, So he make it clear that I'm only just going to follow what Chairman Mao has done. Whatever decisions made by Chairman Mao, we will resolutely uphold, and whatever instructions given by Chairman Mao, we would unswervingly follow. So that's his strategy, and it didn't sit well with anyone because, yes, people were afraid of Mao. No one dared to oppose him, but people knew the country is not going well. It's crazy, So people were happy when the so-called Gang of Four, I said so-called because it was really some leaders of the revolutionaries, when they arrest them, they want to put the blame on them. They didn't want to implicate Mao. They didn't want to admit that it was Mao all along. So they make them the scapegoat. His wife famously said that I was just a bitch of Chairman Mao. I would bite anyone that he asked me to. So they knew clearly they were just being used by Mao for his, way to control, hold on to power. But people were really happy when they were arrested. So people didn't like Cultural Revolution. They didn't like Mao's idea. So when Hua Guofeng said that I'm just going to continue what Mao did, people say, what? You know, you want to continue this craziness? So very quickly, he was being sidelined, okay, by a way more powerful and way more practical and smart leader called Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping, pragmatist. During the Cultural Revolution, he was often targeted by the revolutionaries, and his son, actually, his eldest son, was thrown down from, I think, second or third story and crippled for life by the Red Guards. But he was preserved by, people say Zhou Enlai, but mainly under the permission of Mao, because oftentimes in the past, Deng Xiaoping would be pictured with Liu Xiaoqi, which is the main, you can say, rival of Mao. So Mao won Liu Xiaoqi dead for sure. But Deng Xiaoping, you know, he's just being pragmatic. And Mao knew that he was no threat to him because he was younger. And also Mao kind of understood that you need someone like Deng to operate, you know, the country. So he preserved him, you know, through Zhou Enlai. And when by 1978, you know, barely 2 years after Hua Guofeng became the chairman of the country, the president of the country, Deng Xiaoping is already in power, even though Hua only stepped down officially in 81. But within 2 years, Deng Xiaoping already got the support of the party. And Deng Xiaoping really did 180 reversal of Mao's policies, okay? People say that this overall is a reform. It's not a reform. It is a reverse. Because Mao was the ultimate example of radical leftism. And he would say, okay, certain people should be, you know, he allowed the revolutionaries to say that, no, people, only those who came with the right, you know, family background should lead the country. So, for example, from the peasants, okay, from the low working class, okay. Deng Xiaoping changed that. One of his most famous things that I don't care what color of cat it is. The cat that can catch mouse is a good cat, okay? So it doesn't matter if it's a black cat or a white cat, okay? As long as you can catch mouse, I'm going to use you. I'm going to value you. Meaning that I don't care what your background is. Who cares if your father is a landowner? Who cares if your grandfather was a bourgeoisie, okay? Whatever, okay? Who cares, okay? As long as you can perform, the country needs you, okay? So this is directly opposite to Mao, okay? And he did certain new rules that's always kind of totally against what Mao used to say. For example, he said that poverty is not socialism. And he proposed socialism with cash characteristics. So meaning that he's actually going to examine financial reform. So he's not believing that making everyone poor, you know, and no property is the way of communism. It's not supposed to be. Communism is just a way, you know, of, you know, sharing. But most important in Deng's mind is that socialism is that the communism in China is that Communist Party in power, okay? But everything else can be quite capitalist looking. So basically, you can make money, you can do whatever, as long as you don't oppose us, okay? As long as you don't overthrow the Communist Party, you know, it's okay, okay? So this is socialism with China's characteristics. So he encouraged Chinese to take advantage of the foreign family and kismet connection for development of the country. That is exact opposite of the Cultural Revolution, when the connection with foreign family members or foreigners can get you in trouble, even lead to your death. He also opened up the first special economic zone to allow private property. Now, this private property is something that Mao is always fighting against, okay? He wants to shape people and make them his tools, okay, to develop, okay? He wants them to control them, okay? He was controlling the factories. He had a failure controlling them in the countryside. He tried to collectivize his farm, okay? He was end up failing. Now, there's a long story how Deng managed that, but we're not going to go into that. But that's what Deng did. He wanted to encourage market economy. He looked at Hong Kong. He said, this is fabulous. I want something like Hong Kong. So he take this place called Shenzhen, right above Hong Kong, north of Hong Kong. and he turned it into an economic zone. So he wants to experiment economic reform, He wants to experiment market economy, and he wants to try to do it in this city of Shenzhen. Now, eventually, Mao was successful because Deng was successful. If you look at Deng's achievement, when Deng took over, China was among the poorest countries in the world. 88% of them learning less than $2 a day. Its economy was just 5% of the United States. And since 1978, when he announced the open door policy and he opened up Shenzhen as a special economic zone, he started attracting investment into China. He allowed people to come in China, for example, in Shenzhen, to build factories. Okay, he made rules easier for them. He allowed them to, and of course, because Shenzhen is so close to Hong Kong, a lot of people felt that it's safe to do business in Shenzhen. Okay, because you can always go back to Hong Kong, right? Because it's so close, and people also travel from Hong Kong to Shenzhen a lot easier than elsewhere. 40 years since Deng's economic reforms, China's share of global economy rose from just 1.8% in 1978 to 18.2%, 10 times within 40 years. And now this is the second biggest economy of the world. So it was a fast growth, okay? A lot of miracles happening in Asia economically, and China must be one of them. And if you look at the area which they call the Greater Bay Area, that includes Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong, this area, now this is a 2017 figures, okay? I haven't been able to gather more recent ones for you, sorry. But around about 10 years ago, the area of this Greater Bay Area is less than 1% of China. Population, a bit more comparatively, but still less than 5%. But the GDP, it was 12%. So this is like 10 times the area that should afford, but this is like a concentration of a lot of the economy. So this is so important to China because this tiny area brought in so much revenue. So, and it has a lot to do with Hong Kong because of Hong Kong's proximity to Hong Kong. Now, because of China's opening up, Hong Kong start going into new economic trends, major economic trends. In the beginning, Hong Kong was just a traditional key entry port to China. For some people want to ship something in China, they would go through Hong Kong. It was basically a port of changing hands, in the beginning. But now, with China opening up, people want Hong Kong to take a bigger role. And Hong Kong also saw a need to take a bigger role in investment and building factories. For example, Hong Kong suddenly find that, not suddenly, they just, realized that Hong Kong was no longer competitive enough as a manufacturer because when China opened up, this is an area much bigger, a lot more space, a lot more lands, okay? So if you want to start a factory there, the rent is a lot cheaper and the worker is a lot cheaper as well, the wage. So the only thing you need is to train them. Now that makes Shenzhen so important because you still need to send Hong Kong people to train them. You still need, for example, some kind of connection to help them, because if you want to build something like in the future, like electronics, you need a lot of technology, you need a lot of building up, you need a lot of monitoring, So if you're close to Hong Kong, I can send Hong Kong people from Hong Kong there to look at things, to do things, to give advice. So that proximity is very important. So a lot of and also the investments in Hong Kong, right? I can give you one example. My uncle, he had a very tough life. He started as a very low in a factory, worked for one of his relatives, but the relative make him work for long hours. And he would have dinner at 9 something in the evening because he had to stay in the factory so long. But he worked really hard. He started developing, and later on he started his own company. And he did one thing only, is to develop a kind of a claw or clamp that would clinch onto a marble slab and move it. So, but it's very important when you in a building when you have a really good, secure, this device to hold on to the marble slab, which is very heavy, right? And to use it in building. So they rely on that technology. They rely on that. So he only specialized in that, and that allow him to build 4 factories in Dongguan. And he used to be in Hong Kong. When China opened up, he went back and he started the business. But it's important because he's still in Hong Kong. His son helps him, but the headquarters is still in Hong Kong. But they want to take advantage of the factories, of the cheap land and labor. So that proximity is important because a lot of the investors, they still want a lot of the money thing stay in Hong Kong, as you will see later why. And they also want the rules to be, applying the Hong Kong rules. But by opening up to the world, Deng Xiaoping picked Shenzhen, and Shenzhen is so close that a lot of the Hong Kong investors or entrepreneurs or company owners felt that it's okay to travel there. And my uncle would continue to travel until he fell sick and he no longer going back to China, in the recent few years. But he was doing that for 20 years or so, doing really well, manufacturing all these products for China and for everywhere else. So a lot of the Hong Kong manufacturers start relocating. So Hong Kong starting to fade as a manufacturer. Even yes, you can still say they kind of still does, but it is not as a manufacturer as having a lot of factories in Hong Kong. So that part, died down because all the food factories moved to China. So the workers needs to change, working elsewhere. And that was where the financial sector came by. So if you look at the figures between 1988 and 1995, the overall share of manufacturing in Hong Kong's GDP fell by 12%. But the other, share in trade, transportation, financing, real estate, business services rose. Okay, and by 1995, the share of manufacturing came all the way down to only 9%. So Hong Kong was changing, and it's changing into a financial center. And for the better, because Hong Kong has everything it needs to, it's well positioned because it's so close to China. If people, foreign investors or Hong Kong investors or foreign investors in Hong Kong want to invest in China, and they need financial help because there's lots of help you need, right? Financing, banking, insurance, a lot of financial services you need. Move money around, going into the place. Okay, you need Hong Kong, and by having all these financial institutes in Hong Kong and banks in Hong Kong, Hong Kong becomes the primary route for Western capital to enter into China. For example, Westerners want to invest in China, they want to build factories there. They would rather set up the headquarters in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong they could borrow money, they can finance, they have a good insurance sector there. They can insure their products, and they also under the Hong Kong British rules, or the laissez-faire. So it's very hands-free. So they feel very safe in moving money around, and unlike changing into to do business in China. So if they have their finance totally in China, they will have to worry about the rules, whether the renminbi, the Chinese currency, is convertible and so on. But in the Hong Kong, they don't have to worry anything about that. And Hong Kong has one of the most concentrated, the most highest concentration of banks. Okay, and just second to London. By 1995, for example, Hong Kong has 357 foreign bank offices, second only to London. And Hong Kong bank assets rose from 38 million US to 464 billion, okay, from 2% to 7% worldwide, just in 10 years. So you kind of see how important Hong Kong was, because all these people believing Hong Kong is safe to invest. Okay, we're going to do that, even though we're going to take advantage of China's, land, labor, infrastructure. For example, I'm still going to go to Shenzhen to build my factories, but Hong Kong must be where I'm going to put our money because Hong Kong is safe. And Hong Kong has a very good financial system and banking system. Hong Kong has no central bank until 1993 for the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. It's really to help Hong Kong to weather some of the storms. For example, it's being attacked by some international prospectors and investors, as we'll see next time. But still today, Hong Kong notes were issued by commercial banks. The Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, Standard Chartered, and also Bank of China. The reason is if you're in economy, you know that some countries still does that. For example, Scotland. And the reason is that for a country just like Canada, to have a Bank of Canada, when you issue bank notes, sometimes you are persuaded by the government's policy of interest. Okay, for example, when you're running out of money, you produce more, you print more notes just to finance your program. But for commercial banks, there's a lot more at stake because financial bank, the printing of the money is always guided by the principle that if I want you to buy back all the notes, you have money to buy back. So you can, they're all redeemable. So if you print more, then you are willing to buy back or for the same, comparable value. That means that you're printing too much. And government can sue you. Government can charge you and put a big penalty on you and take away your rights to print. So a lot of legal consequences for these commercial banks. But the government have very little legal consequences because they make the rules, right? So if they choose to print more, they just change the policy. Okay, we're going to change more. We're going to help this situation. So there's no legal consequences for the decision for a government bank, okay, or central bank. So in this case, people trust Hong Kong's currencies. And also Hong Kong currency was picked to the US in 83. That means that its value has come guaranteed, unlike some other currencies, that may fluctuate a lot. So Hong Kong currency, remember, also Hong Kong currency is highly convertible. Now, China's currency is still not totally convertible, and depending on which currencies you take, okay? So China create, and one time, I'm not sure still do now, but it's one time there's a two-tier, okay? It's for the currency for financing or to doing trading and also for internal use. But there's a lot of restriction regarding the RMB, and also because RMB is strictly controlled by the Central Bank of China. So they knew that it's not as reliable as the Hong Kong dollars. But Hong Kong currency remain ticket to US, and there's no restriction about converting. So whatever you make in Hong Kong dollars, you can easily convert into a foreign currency according to the exchange rate. So there's no frame. But if you make money in, especially back then in RMB, you may be concerned that you cannot change it back or to the same value again. Or what happens if suddenly China decide to change the exchange rate? It may become a less valuable currency. So, and the Hong Kong also has a very strong approach of the so-called positive non-interventionism, meaning that it's not going to interfere. Okay, Hong Kong will not try to create barriers. So a lot of the people for a long time, only in the recent years that Singapore is going ahead. But for the longest time, the first choice is Hong Kong because people coming in business with a bunch of money, they can invest in Hong Kong. They may lose money if they make a wrong decision, but it's not because of government's policy. It's not suddenly Hong Kong saying, I'm going to confiscate your branch, I'm going to confiscate your money, or Hong Kong saying you're no longer convertible to your currency, or Hong Kong say that you cannot take this money out of your country. No, Hong Kong will not do that. So for a long time, it's very reliable to invest in Hong Kong. So make Hong Kong the ideal financial center of the world. Just look at it. China tried very hard to duplicate a city like Hong Kong. They try to pick, for example, in the past, they want Shenzhen to be like Hong Kong. They want Shanghai to be like Hong Kong, and they want Macau to be like Hong Kong. Even Macau, Macau is a lot closer, but not even Macau was able to replace Hong Kong because simply for environment like in China, they can never be as non-interventional as Hong Kong. And even as late as recently, billion investor Mark Mobius say that China is restricting flow of capital, because China always wants some control. If you're from mainland China, even if you make a lot of money in mainland China, you can't move that money out. It's always government's policy. When government allow it, people would take the money out as much as they could and start buying properties in places like Vancouver. But usually China, afraid of this outflow of cash, of resources, they will limit it. So a lot of time, people from mainland can only move certain amount, for example, 10,000 Chinese RMB out of the country a year. So a lot of restriction. So restriction is always bad news to investors and big money makers, big financial institutes in the world. So Hong Kong's advantage is non-interventional, highly convertible currency. You're never afraid that Hong Kong dollars becomes a useless note because you can always change back to US to another currency, or EU, euros. Vibrant bank system, human resources. Hong Kong people are highly skilled. They're educated, they're bilingual. Relatively political stability. Now that last part becoming more and more questionable in recent time, recent days, For example, Google in China, put this way, I always say, I think from the very beginning, values of Hong Kong is that Hong Kong is kind of part of China, Sovereignty rights is part of China, but it's not exactly China. So let me rephrase it. Hong Kong is part of China, because politically, sovereignty is part of China. There's no question about this, You may disagree, you don't want it, but it is part of China. But it's not exactly China, This is a better way to say it. Hong Kong is part of China, but it's not exactly China. Because there are many things that you can do in Hong Kong that you still can't do in China. Just simply go online, You can go Google, YouTube, you can do things again in China, you can't. You can take money out from Hong Kong, you can't do in China. So the moment Hong Kong does not have that, it's the end of Hong Kong. And I always say that. Because land-wise, Hong Kong is very small, even compared to Shenzhen. Population-wise, long surpassed by Shenzhen and other places, So Hong Kong is a small place, small population comparatively, and why Hong Kong still, it's only when you have freedom. When people feel that it's free to go in there and invest, to do things, and not, go into trouble, that makes Hong Kong special. And because Hong Kong is so close. Now, in recent years, of course, we're going to come to that later. For example, since, say 2014 or more important 2019, because of the political unrest or because of the protests and the antagonism going on, Hong Kong government or Chinese government have been trying to control Hong Kong more. Concerned that the freedom in Hong Kong is going to lead to bad consequences. But the moment they want to control Hong Kong more, the moment they feel that it is killing Hong Kong. And I'm quite sure the Hong Kong government realized that as well, but they're doing a very difficult situation. They're in a very tough spot. On one hand, trying to control Hong Kong so that it won't concern China. But they know that the more you control Hong Kong, the easier Hong Kong will be killed. So they didn't want to do it as much, but they can't do it. They cannot not do it. So the problem is that usually they pick people who run Hong Kong with those who, show a certain willingness to do things for China, and meaning that they have a tendency to have more, exert more control over Hong Kong than Hong Kong people want. Now, of course, you have the situation complicated. I have students also that they say they are deep blue. They agree with China. They don't agree with the protesters. But as far as I know, most people in Hong Kong, you may even support mainland. You may support. This should be closer. Hong Kong should be closer to China. But I don't think many people will agree to have less freedom. They want their freedom. They don't want Hong Kong to be like China. If Hong Kong suddenly say, okay, I'm going to limit the way you move money, they will say no too. They may say that, okay, Hong Kong should be, closer to China, but if same kind of, things that you do in Hong Kong, yet you do in China, they will say no. For example, they go on Facebook and say, okay, we want Hong Kong to be more like China. But think about it, in China, you can't even go on Facebook in the proper way. You have to use VPN or so. So it's strange, okay? Sometimes they will say things, but you know that they will not welcome that. So I think most people still want more freedom. Just like, Hong Kong all along. So the struggle is about how to limit the freedom of Hong Kong without killing Hong Kong. So this is the tough things that Hong Kong government is going through. Give you an example. For example, when they have this in 2019, they have this song that they would play. When 光歸香港, it will be like a anthem song for the protesters. Okay, now you can say that under the Lion Rock is another anthem of Hong Kong. Okay, which is true, especially those remembering the past. But this song, "Glory to Hong Kong," was a song that used by protesters. So now in Hong Kong, you're not allowed to sing it, which is weird because in a free place like Hong Kong, but if you go there, like if you perform in public and sing the song, the police will come and talk to you. Okay, so they want to limit that freedom, but they also want to limit because the problem is that sometimes when Hong Kong compete in the world, when they search for anthem, maybe some official didn't know. I'm quite sure it's not on purpose. Okay, I don't think a sports event like to anger China like that. But what happened is that sometimes in the sports event, they would play the song as the Hong Kong anthem rather than the Chinese anthem because maybe they search on Google's and that song came out on top. So Hong Kong government is very unhappy because it's afraid that it angered China and also very embarrassing for the Hong Kong government. So they did different things. On one thing, they would threaten the country. If we play this song, we're not going to compete. But it's no use because these countries may not know better. Okay, they're just searching online. So the other things they did is they would talk to Google, say stop, putting that song, playing that song on Google's. But Google refused, and because Google's never does that. Okay, Google say if you like the Chinese anthem to be on top, pay us. Okay, as an ad. Okay, or pay us so that we can do it. But the Hong Kong government saying I shouldn't pay you because it should be done that way. But because Google algorithm has something to do with the search among number of searches as well. So Google refused to change it unless it's an ad, okay? And the Hong Kong government refused to pay, but they didn't back down either. They didn't insist either. They were saying that, okay, if you don't do this, we may remove you. But the Hong Kong government knew the moment you remove Google, it will be a big event because that means that everything people are accusing you of, okay, of limiting Hong Kong freedom, killing Hong Kong freedom, is no longer one country, two system. It will be true. So Hong Kong government did not go that way. Okay, so they backed down. What they did is that they start threatening the sports teams. Okay, saying that you should provide the anthem to the to whoever organizing the sports. Okay. And also, I know that because one of my students used to play for Hong Kong, unfortunately, he didn't have that copy of the form. He was asked to sign a form that if you are an athlete performing, competing on behalf of Hong Kong and you won, and you're in the stadium or podium, and when they play the song, they play the wrong song, you cannot sing along. and you even have to step down to show your sign of protest because they couldn't control Google, they control their athletes. Because if you don't do that, I'm not going to let you compete. And for the athletes, they only just want to show their, what they've done in their hard, long training. So they weren't necessarily political. But when you said it that way, they have to comply. So I know that because this one of my students used to compete for Hong Kong, and he was asked to sign that form. I'm still hoping that I would find such a form to show students, okay? Because it's not a big secret, Hong Kong likely will do that because he can't force a tech giant like Google to back down, and he has to make his people to come do something about it. But so this shows that difficulty of Hong Kong government, and also difficult situation Hong Kong is facing nowadays. Hong Kong will remain to be viable. Hong Kong will remain to be strong if Hong Kong was able to maintain its freedom. So Hong Kong government keeps saying that nowadays that we only purging those who were causing trouble in 2019, because endangering national security. But how far can you go with endangering of national security? Is it just by singing a song, So how far would you go to limit Hong Kong's freedom? Yes, people are saying, okay, we love China, we want Hong Kong to be more like China, but would they want to go back to live in China? They may not, because there are things in China that they don't want to go through either, So how much you want Hong Kong to be, to be like China in order to be safe, okay? So for me, Hong Kong must be safe. Hong Kong must be free. The more freedom you allow Hong Kong, the more likely Hong Kong is going to be prosperous. How much, of course, to the ruling party, is another thing, or would you allow Hong Kong to, go back to, what happened in 2010s? Again, it's unlikely. So, but the fight for freedom in Hong Kong is necessary. And I always feel that how much you can maintain Hong Kong to be free is how much Hong Kong will be able to survive. But of course, it's complicated. We're going to come back to this issue, okay, as we talk more about, especially later on, why is Hong Kong, so many, especially young Hong Kong people, so turned off by the Hong Kong government and the mainland government. So we're going to talk about that later. But this is the situation in the 80s when Hong Kong starts switching to become a financial center. Next, we're going to talk about a very touchy subject, the 1997, or important subject, okay, that starting to affect Hong Kong in the 1980s and 1990s.